A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You know, Herman, we talk a lot about the technical side of the internet, the infrastructure, the algorithms, and the way data moves. But we rarely pause to look at the human cost of just existing in those spaces, especially when you decide to be your authentic self. It feels like the price of admission to the digital town square has skyrocketed lately.
Herman Poppleberry here, and you are absolutely right, Corn. It is a tension that has only tightened over the last few years. We are told that authenticity is the currency of the digital age, right? If you want to build a brand or a community, you have to be transparent. You have to show your face, share your values, and let people into your life. But there is a massive paradox there that we do not talk about enough. We are living in a post-algorithmic landscape where being yourself is actually a high-risk maneuver.
The radical transparency paradox. The more of yourself you give to the world, the larger your attack surface becomes. Our housemate Daniel sent us a really heavy prompt this week that hits on this exact nerve. He's been running a YouTube channel for a while, not for money, just for the love of the craft and sharing ideas. But he told us that following the events of October 7th, he was hit with this absolute deluge of anti-Semitic harassment. It was not just criticism, it was a coordinated, ugly effort to silence him. And he reached a point where he just said, "You know what? This is not worth the toll." He took a break. He did not feel physically unsafe, but the sheer exhaustion of the experience led him to withdraw.
That is the silencing effect in action. And it is something we see happening across the board in early 2026. When the cost of speaking your truth, or even just existing as yourself, becomes a full-time job of defense, most sane people are going to choose to step back. Daniel was asking us how to navigate this. How do you maintain an open space for your friends and fans without leaving your front door wide open for the wolves?
It is a vital question because if we do not find an answer, the only people left talking online will be the ones who are either completely anonymous or those who have sanitized their personalities so much that they are basically corporate chatbots. We are losing the human element because the humans are being hunted out of the town square. We are seeing a shift from organic community building to what I call defensive engagement farming, where creators only post things they know are safe, or they post high arousal content just to trigger the algorithm, even if it makes them a target.
And it is not just a social problem, it is a structural one. The platforms we use are designed for engagement, but they are not designed for protection. In fact, the very things that make a creator successful, like being vulnerable and open, are the exact things that bad actors use as handles to tear them down. This brings us to the core of the problem. If the platform is designed to reward the very transparency that makes us vulnerable, how do we change the game?
I want to dig into that structural side first. Why is it that the architecture of the modern web seems to favor the aggressor over the creator? It feels like we are playing a game where the rules are rigged against anyone who wants to have a nuanced conversation.
It comes down to what we call context collapse. In a physical space, if I am talking to you in our living room here in Jerusalem, I know who I am talking to. I know the context of our relationship. But online, when you post a video or a thought, it is stripped of all that. It is a raw piece of data that can be picked up by anyone, anywhere, and repurposed. And in late 2025 and moving into 26, we have seen this get weaponized by automated sentiment analysis.
Right, we touched on this in episode 1321 when we talked about semantic mimicry. These bad actors are not just sitting there typing individual insults anymore. They are using large language models to scan thousands of hours of content to find specific keywords or stances that they can use to trigger mass reporting or coordinated brigading.
Precisely. As of March 2026, these automated tools have become incredibly sophisticated. They can identify a creator's political leaning or their ethnic identity with about 94% accuracy just by analyzing speech patterns and visual cues. Once they have that, they can deploy botnets that do not just say things that are clearly against the terms of service, they stay right on the edge. They use what we call semantic harassment, where the words themselves might seem benign to a basic filter, but the intent and the volume are designed to overwhelm the human on the other end.
That is the exhaustion Daniel was talking about. It is the death by 1,000 cuts. If one person calls you a name, you shrug it off. But if 10,000 accounts are constantly questioning your right to exist, or twisting your words in your comments section every single day, it creates a mental load that is unsustainable, and the data backs this up. Studies from late 2025 show that creators who engage with negative comments experience a 30% higher rate of subsequent brigading compared to those who use automated block lists.
That 30% statistic is crucial, Corn. It proves that the old advice of just engage with your critics or be the bigger person is actually dangerous in the current environment. Engaging is like throwing blood in the water. The algorithms see the activity, they boost the post, and that brings in even more sharks. The platforms love the engagement. That is the dark secret. Whether the engagement is a fan saying they love your work or a troll screaming at you, to the algorithm, it is all just activity. It keeps people on the app. So, the creator is essentially being used as bait to generate ad revenue for the platform, while the platform provides almost zero effective tools to stop the harassment.
It is the ultimate creator's dilemma. You are told to be transparent to grow, but that transparency is the very thing that makes you vulnerable. It reminds me of what we discussed in episode 1292 about the visibility trap. We are louder than ever, yet because of this noise, we are actually easier to ignore or to target. Daniel mentioned he does not do this for money, which in some ways makes it harder. If it were a job, you might just hire a moderator and treat it like a business. But when it is a personal passion project, the harassment feels like a direct attack on your soul.
It is personal, especially when it involves something as deep as anti-Semitism or your stance on a conflict that affects your actual life and your community here. When Daniel talks about the harassment he faced after October 7th, he is talking about people attacking his fundamental identity. That is not something you just ignore. And it highlights a massive double standard in how these platforms handle hate speech. We see coordinated campaigns against voices that are often ignored by the automated moderation systems because the attackers are savvy enough to use coded language that bypasses the simple filters of 2024.
So, what is the alternative to the all-or-nothing approach? Daniel said he resorted to avoiding engagement entirely, but that felt like a compromise of his values. He wants to connect with people, but the bridge is being guarded by trolls. Is there a middle ground between being a wide-open target and a total hermit?
I think we have to move toward what I call asymmetric engagement. The old advice was, don't feed the trolls, but as we said before, that does not work when the trolls are automated or part of a coordinated swarm. You cannot starve a machine. So, you have to change the geometry of the interaction. We need to move from the why to the how. Let's look at some strategies for reclaiming your creative space without disappearing entirely.
Asymmetric engagement. That sounds like a military strategy. How does that apply to a YouTube channel or a social media feed?
It means you stop treating every interaction as equal. Right now, most creators have an open loop system. Anyone can comment, anyone can direct message, and the creator feels a social obligation to at least acknowledge it. To survive in 26, you have to move to a closed loop or a tiered access model. You have to gate your transparency. You have to decouple your personal identity from your public output.
Like moving the real conversations to a private Discord or a Substack, where there is a barrier to entry.
You use the public platforms like YouTube or X as a top-of-funnel discovery tool. You post your content, you share your ideas, but you turn off the comments or you use extremely aggressive algorithmic filtering. You do not look at the mentions. Then, you move the actual community building to a space where you have control. A space where people have to show a level of commitment to be there, whether that is a small subscription fee or just a moderated application process. This is the difference between an open-loop creator who engages with every comment and a closed-loop creator who curates a high-trust environment.
I can hear the pushback already, though. People will say, but Corn, that creates an echo chamber, or you are hiding from the public. But if the public square has become a toxic waste dump, is it really a service to anyone to stand in the middle of it and get sick?
It is not about hiding, it is about sustainability. If Daniel leaves YouTube entirely, his voice is gone. That is a win for the harassers. If he moves the conversation to a gated space, he is still creating, he is still sharing his perspective, but he is doing it in a way that does not destroy his mental health. We have to redefine what authenticity means online.
That is a hard one for creators who have built their brand on being authentic. If I am a creator and I tell you, hey, this is my life, this is my house, these are my kids, and then I suddenly put up a wall, it feels like I am being fake. But maybe authenticity is not about total access. It is about total honesty in the spaces you choose to inhabit.
I think that is a brilliant way to put it. Authenticity is not a performance of your entire life for a bunch of strangers. It is the integrity of your message. You can be 100% authentic in a private group of 500 people and 0% authentic on a public stage where you are constantly self-censoring to avoid a ban or brigade. Self-censorship is the silent killer here. Daniel mentioned he felt pressured to withdraw. That is a form of self-censorship. When you start thinking, I want to say X, but if I do, I will have to deal with 48 hours of hate mail, so I will just say Y instead, you have already lost. The harassers have won without even firing a shot. They have occupied your mind.
That is why the tiered model is so important. It protects the creative process. If you know you are speaking to a vetted audience, you can be bolder. You can be more nuanced. You do not have to put a disclaimer on every sentence to avoid being taken out of context by a bad actor with a sentiment analysis tool. Let's talk about the technical reality of that context collapse for a second. Herman, you mentioned that large language models are being used to find these handles. If a creator wanted to stay on a public platform but minimize their attack surface, what does digital OPSEC look like for them? We talked about this in episode 779 regarding wartime, but it feels like the digital space is becoming a permanent low-intensity conflict zone for creators.
It really is. We need a concrete checklist for creators feeling this pressure. Step 1 is metadata hygiene. People do not realize how much they are giving away in the background of their videos or the EXIF data in their photos. If you are a high-profile creator or even just a targeted one, you need to be scrubbing that. There are tools now that automatically strip location data and blur sensitive background details. But the bigger issue is semantic OPSEC. You have to be aware of the keywords that trigger the botnets.
So, you are saying creators should talk in code? That feels like it defeats the purpose of being a communicator.
It is not about talking in code. It is about being strategic with how you frame things. For example, if you know that a certain hashtag or a specific phrase is being monitored by a harassment swarm, you might choose to discuss the concept without using the trigger word. Or, better yet, you use what we call dark posting. You post content that is only visible to certain segments of your audience, or you use platforms that do not allow for easy cross-platform sharing of snippets.
It is about breaking the chain of distribution that the harassers rely on. They rely on the ability to take a 5-second clip of you saying something and blast it out to an audience that hates you. If you make it harder for them to do that, you reduce the incentive.
And we have to address the psychological toll. Daniel mentioned he was exhausted. That is the goal of these campaigns. It is a war of attrition. They want to make the cost of your presence higher than the benefit you get from it. To counter that, creators need to adopt a seasonal approach. I call it the 3-month rule.
Is that like a digital detox?
Not exactly. It is about planned cycles of visibility. You go high transparency, high engagement for a period, you build your community, you put out your best work, and then you intentionally go dark for a month. You turn off the inputs. You do not check the stats, you do not read the comments, you treat your creative life like a crop rotation. If you try to grow the same thing in the same soil every single day without a break, the soil becomes depleted and the pests move in.
I like that analogy. The pests being the trolls. If they know you are going to be gone for a month, they might move on to a different target. But if you are always there, always reacting, you are a reliable source of entertainment for them.
Reaction is the fuel. If you stop reacting, the fire eventually dies down. But most creators are terrified to stop because the algorithm punishes inactivity. This is where the platforms are truly complicit. They have created a system where you are literally penalized for taking a break to protect your mental health.
It is a predatory design. But if we look at the trend, especially as we move deeper into 26, I think we're seeing a mass migration. People are getting tired of the big open squares. We are seeing the rise of the digital campfire. Smaller, more intimate spaces where you can actually be yourself. Does that mean the dream of the open internet is dead? That idea that we could all talk to each other and understand each other across cultures and borders? It feels like we are retreating into our own little fortresses.
I think the dream was naive because it ignored human nature and the power of bad actors to scale their malice. The open internet is great for information, but it is terrible for intimacy. We tried to use a tool designed for data transfer to facilitate human relationships, and we are seeing the fallout of that mistake. Authenticity is a resource, Korn. And like any resource, if you do not protect it, it will be exploited and exhausted.
That is a powerful point. Authenticity is not a requirement for public consumption. It is a gift you give to a community that has earned your trust. Daniel, if you are listening, I think the takeaway here is that taking a break was not a failure. It was a strategic retreat to preserve your most valuable asset, your voice.
And when you do come back, do it on your own terms. Don't let the algorithm or the trolls dictate how you interact with the world. If you want to turn off comments, turn them off. If you want to move to a private group, move. The people who truly value what you do will follow you there. The ones who just want to scream at you will find someone else to target.
It is about reclaiming agency. We spend so much time worrying about what the platforms want or what the audience wants that we forget that the creator is the one with the actual power. Without the creators, these platforms are just empty shells.
I want to touch on one more thing regarding Daniel's experience. The specific nature of the harassment he faced, the anti-Semitism, is part of a larger trend of using geopolitical events as a justification for digital pogroms. We saw this in late 24 and throughout 25. There is a coordinated effort to make certain identities too expensive to maintain online.
It is a form of digital cleansing. If you make it so painful for a pro-Israel voice or a Jewish creator to exist in a space, they will eventually leave. And then you have successfully changed the narrative of that space by force. It is not a debate, it is an eviction.
Which is why we have to be so intentional about supporting the people who are being targeted. If you see a creator you like being brigaded, don't just sit there, reach out to them privately, let them know their voice matters. That private support can be the difference between someone quitting and someone deciding to push through.
That is the human element again. We can use the same tools to build each other up that the bad actors use to tear us down. It just takes more effort. Hate is easy to automate. Empathy and support require a human touch.
We should probably look at some practical takeaways for anyone else feeling this pressure. Because Daniel is definitely not alone. The first one, which we have hit on, is tiered access. If you are a creator, look at platforms like Substack, Patreon, or even just a private Discord. Create a space where you can be your authentic self without the fear of a random botnet finding you.
Second would be what you called metadata hygiene. Be careful about what you're showing in the background. Don't give people handles to find your physical location or details about your private life that they can weaponize. We are in a world where doxing has become a standard tool of harassment.
Third, and this is a hard one, is to stop measuring your success by engagement metrics. If your comments are full of hate, that is high engagement, but it is toxic. If you have 10 people in a private group having a deep, meaningful conversation, that is low engagement by the platform standards, but it is infinitely more valuable for your soul.
And fourth, the 3-month rule, or whatever cycle works for you. Build in periods of complete digital silence, not just for your audience, but for yourself. You need time to reconnect with the real world, the physical world. Here in Jerusalem, we have the benefit of a culture that values that. We have the Sabbath. We have times where the world just stops. We need a digital equivalent of that.
I think that is the most important one. We have to remember that the internet is not the real world. It is a filtered, distorted, and often weaponized reflection of it. If you spend all your time in the reflection, you forget who you are in the light.
Daniel, thank you for being so open with us about this. It is a tough topic, but I think it is one that every creator needs to hear. You are not a robot, and you are not a punching bag. You are a human being with a voice that matters, and you have every right to protect that voice.
Well said, Corn. And for everyone listening, if you have been feeling that digital burnout or that fear of being torn to shreds for your views, just know that there are other ways to exist online. You don't have to follow the path the platforms have laid out for you. You can build your own campfire.
If you found this discussion helpful, or if you have your own stories about navigating the transparency paradox, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out through the contact form at myweirdprompts.com.
And while you are there, you can check out our full archive. We have over 1,300 episodes now, covering everything from technical deep dives to these more philosophical explorations of our digital lives. You can find the RSS feed there, or just search for My Weird Prompts on your favorite podcast app.
We are also on Telegram. If you search for My Weird Prompts there, you can subscribe to get notified every time a new episode drops. It is a great way to stay connected without having to rely on the big social media algorithms.
And hey, if you have been listening for a while and you appreciate the work we do, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really does help the show reach new people, and we genuinely appreciate the feedback.
We really do. It is one of the things that keeps us going. Herman, any final thoughts on the transparency paradox before we wrap up for today?
Just that authenticity is a journey, not a destination. It is okay for that journey to take you through some quiet, private places. You don't always have to be shouting from the mountaintop to be heard. Sometimes the most important things are said in a whisper to the people who are actually listening.
That is a great note to end on. Authenticity is not a requirement for public consumption. It is a resource to be protected. Thank you for listening to My Weird Prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. We will be back next week with another prompt, another deep dive, and hopefully some more clarity in this weird digital world we are all navigating.
Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and maybe take a little break from the comments section. You probably deserve it.
You definitely deserve it. See you next time.
Before we go, I was just thinking about that point you made about the 3-month rule. I think that applies to more than just creators. Even as a consumer of content, we get caught in these cycles of outrage and engagement. We feel like we have to have a take on everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. The pressure to perform your values is not just on the people making the videos, it is on everyone. You see something happen in the news, and you feel this internal pressure to post about it, to show which side you are on, to prove you are a good person. It is exhausting for everyone.
It is the performative nature of the modern web, and it leads back to that silencing effect. If you don't post, people assume the worst. If you do post, you become a target. It is a lose-lose situation.
Which is why we have to reject the premise. We have to give ourselves permission to be silent. Silence is not complicity. Sometimes silence is just sanity. It is the ability to process things at a human speed rather than at the speed of a fiber optic cable.
I think that is a lesson we could all use right now, especially with how fast things are moving here in 26. It feels like every day there is a new crisis, a new technology, a new reason to be outraged. Taking a step back and saying, I am not going to engage with this today, is a radical act of self-care.
It really is. And it allows you to come back with more clarity when you are ready. Like Daniel taking his break. He is not quitting, he is recalibrating. And when he does decide to share again, I bet his content will be even more impactful because it will come from a place of peace rather than a place of defense.
I am looking forward to seeing what he does next. He has a great perspective, and the world needs more voices like his, especially the ones that are brave enough to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard.
We need the humans. We can't let the bots and the bullies win by default. We just have to be smarter about how we play the game.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for joining us on My Weird Prompts. Head over to myweirdprompts.com for all the links and to search our archive.
And don't forget to find us on Telegram. Just search for My Weird Props. We will see you next time.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe out there.
Peace.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth